think you couldn't hear me. Oh, no, it's Daniel Kahani. Hello, Daniel, can you hear me? Hello? I cannot hear you. Sorry. Cannot hear you, sorry. Maybe just send in your questions by writing them, or you can call. You can call if you want. All right, so before we start the actual shir, we will begin with answering some questions that Yoram sent in. All right, let's see. On Shabbos day, you're allowed to take food from the fridge that is solid and fully cooked and put them on the blech to be reheated. That is a machlokes. Some places can allow it. Rabbi Yosef allows it. Other places can forbid it. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach forbids it, and generally the Chabad minhag is not to do it.
Okay, so Chabad not to do it?
Rabbi Yosef, yes.
Yes.
If it's solid.
If it's solid.
Solid fully cooked.
But no.
Not liquid.
Not liquid.
Are you allowed to move a kli shemalach l'Isra on Shabbos for the reason of tzarech gufay and mekayma? Yes. For examples of kli shemalach l'Isra: a phone, computer, light that is connected to the wall, pencils or pens, etc. So anything that's expensive is not a kli shemalach l'Isra. It's called a muktzah machmas chasar and kiss. A computer is muktzah machmas chasar and kiss. A phone also. Pencils, pens, and a light that is not on, those are not so expensive. So those you could move the tzarech gufay and mekayma.
What about if it's on?
If it's on, it's more strict. Because if it's on, then it's like a fire, and the fire is higher level muktzah. So I wouldn't recommend you move it even for mekayma or gufay. Two examples. By accident, someone left a computer on the bed before Shabbos. Is one allowed to move it after Shabbos house and mekayma? The answer is that a computer is expensive, so it's a high level muktzah, so you cannot move it mekayma, but you can push it out of the way k'la'achar yad. You can push it with the back of your hand, your elbow. That's up to you. You can sleep on the floor.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
Okay, it's good to know. It's good to know.
It's expensive. Can move it or cannot?
Cannot move it. It's expensive. It's stricter.
Why?
Because an expensive, forbidden thing you would never use for another use.
You
would never use a computer to throw out somebody. I mean, maybe if you got very mad, but you wouldn't use it for cutting board or anything.
Right.
A pen, a pencil, or anything not expensive, even though it's a forbidden object, you might use it for other things. So that's why.
So pencil, you're allowed to move it?
If it's in the way or if you need it, yeah.
Okay.
If there's a light or fan connected to the wall, it's permitted to move the source to where it's needed light for reading, as long as you do not pull out the electric source. A light, no. A fan, yes. A light is strict and it's like a fire, but a fan you can move to direct it wherever you want to direct it.
Baruch Hashem.
All right, I hope that answers your daughter's questions.
Baruch Hashem.
So last Shabbos, two interesting things came up related to what literally related to what we're doing.
All right.
Walk into this shul on Shabbos morning.
Yep.
And there's a burning smell.
Scary.
Okay. No, they had already dealt with it, but it was going to be bad. They walked in and they found that the crock pot had done some shorty stuff.
Yeah.
The cholent was burning.
Uh-huh.
And so they were trying to preserve it.
Ouch. I'm scared to
I don't know
listen.
what that means. They didn't end up doing anything, but it was just kind of interesting. I don't know what there was to preserve and if it was possible even.
What did they do?
They threw it out. The crock pot was gone.
Wow.
So I don't know. I was like, because they said, we were trying to preserve the cholent to see if we could still scoop out what was edible or something. It just was, the whole thing didn't make sense to me.
But I have a question about your question.
But that is no big deal. But Adding water would be a big problem.
Rabbi, but the smell is fire. They throw the food, it's okay. But what they do with electric on Shabbat?
Oh, well, because nefesh is one aspect, but you can't preserve property.
Just take it off.
It's okay?
No, just take it out from.
Take the crock out of the pot. That's
No,
all.
but the smell is from the plug, right?
Can you unplug it, you mean?
Yes, it smell fire.
I don't know. We're not going to address that issue right now.
Okay,
Yep.
number two, is more practical.
Yep.
My cleaning lady came over, whatever, she was setting some tables, my wife was having some guests over.
Yep.
So my wife's like, oh my God, she unplugged the hot plate.
The cleaning lady
Lady
unplugged the
came
hot
over.
plate. Is it on Shabbos or on Yom Tov?
No, it was on Shabbos. It was Shabbos morning. She goes, I have no idea why she unplugged the hot plate. She goes, okay, I guess we're done. Whatever. Come back home from school, it's all plugged back in, like everything's fine. Like, yeah, I guess she was like, I don't know why she unplugged it. Maybe she was trying to. So
We study about that. She cannot
No.
do that food.
No. So what do you do? What did you do?
Well, that was my question.
She could
She
do
was
that.
clear-
It's Michael's turn.
She was-
Michael's
she
turn.
was-
What did you do?
She was doing it for us, clearly, but we didn't tell her anything. She unplugged it, then she replugged it, just assuming, I think she had to move something or clean something back there, and the food was there the whole time.
No. So what did you paskin?
I don't want to pass it
I
on.
What did you
remember we
do?
studied that, Rabbi. I remember we studied that.
What did you do?
Did you have the lunch?
You ate the food. Okay.
So it's
No.
good, Baruch Hashem.
Right or wrong?
You did good. Because she cannot cancel your food.
I didn't-
That wasn't a shmuz though. You're talking about impermissible chazar.
I don't know if it was even chazar, the food never
She
came off the
plugged
plate.
She plugged it in, which is what?
It's really, it's all relighting a fire.
Maybe it's avar if it gets red hot. Maybe.
See, that's a different story, right?
If we hadn't
Nope.
seen it, we wouldn't
Nope.
have even known that
No
she
different
even
story.
touched it, that's the thing.
It's not a different story. The answer is that the goy does not have the power to take something that is already fully cooked and make it asa. Doesn't have the power to do it.
Baruch Hashem.
I didn't want to pass him, but I'm glad that.
Yeah, but we studied that.
No, I know, but it's just when it's
If-
practically happening at that moment.
Now, we did learn a difference if you knew that she was doing it and you didn't stop her, maybe you even instructed her to do it, then if it's Mastamek v'yafaloi, then we're not going to allow you. But if you didn't know about it, she did it beyond, without any knowledge of yours, that she doesn't have the power to take
We
something
were leaving
with her
to
and make it
shul, and
asa.
my wife noticed she unplugged it, she goes, oops. That's it, so I guess, we're eating cold or whatever.
Yeah.
We come home from shul, it's plugged back in and everything.
Yeah. Good.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay, so.
Baruch
it's,
Hashem.
If it's not live, you go to your neighbor.
No, I know, but it was fine.
The malacha
And it was the same
would be
morning
why you
as
wouldn't be
this
allowed to
thing
do
that
it.
happened here with the children. I said, you know what?
Malacha would be maybe why you were not allowed to do it in the first place, right? But in terms of having hana from it, because it was already edible,
Yeah, it was.
right? So the goy doesn't have the power to make it aser. That's what we said.
You said that if it's a shmuz and there's a near loss.
Then it's mutar lachatchila. A shvus with a mir l'nachri is a shvus to shvus, and then it's mutar lachatchila in the case of need. But here we're not talking about whether it's a permissible action or not. We're talking about whether you can benefit from it or not. So we said in a case where it's fully edible and the guy was not instructed to do it, and you didn't even see it, he just did it, he doesn't have the power to make it aser against your will.
It's not no longer at shmuz level, now it's on halacha level.
If it would be shvus level, we'd be talking about allowing you to do it. We're not talking about allowing you to do it. We're talking about if he did it, if he has the power to make it aser. Different discussion. Yes. Yeah, it seems to be free for all. Yeah. Shabbos.
It's been 2 weeks.
Go ahead.
Loud.
Go ahead. I hope the computer students are hearing the questions too. Go ahead, loud and clear. Yes.
Before Shabbat.
Yep.
Everything's fully cooked, just to heat up, obviously. And I guess I pressed something on the on the plug that goes into the wall, there's, I don't know how to explain, that on-off switch.
breaker?
The breaker, the
Yeah,
GFI.
pretty much, I pressed it, or I unpressed it, or pressed it again,
So
whatever.
it was
it
off.
is.
Turn it up.
It ended up being that it wasn't on at all. My father-in-law comes in, he doesn't keep Shabbos at the end of the meal, and he says, touches the plata, and he says, "What is this? It's off." He
Reset it.
fixes it.
Reset it.
He's
He's Jewish.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to do that. I'm sorry.
So it was actually
Asur
it was
after
actually at the end of
Shabbat.
the meal where he did that. So 2 questions I have. One, we didn't eat the food anymore. We already ate the food, or whatever it was. It wasn't warm. It was warm because it was from Shabbos. We covered it, put it on the plata. But was I allowed to use the plata for tomorrow lunch, for the next day lunch?
Oh, this is Friday night when it happened.
That was Friday night. At the end of the meal, he goes and sees the plata. Like, what did you do to not make this work? Like, and sees the technician, and he presses the thing, and he's made it work. I knew what I did to make it unwork, so I knew that I just couldn't do that. He came himself, turned it on. Can I use the plata for Shabbos for other things? I didn't really understand.
No.
Only a Yid would have been using it.
That's called Maisa Shabbos.
Yeah.
Maisa Shabbos. So a Jew does anything on Shabbos, even b'shoigig. In other words, even if you want to argue, you didn't know better, whatever. Even if you want to argue that, even b'shoigig, you cannot benefit from what a Jew does on Shabbos itself.
On Shabbos.
After Shabbos, though.
After Shabbos, yes.
Let's take his question further, Rabbi.
No, no,
If it's
Shabbos.
a goy, does that
Let's not.
by itself.
Let's not. Let's not. That's it. That's it. Open season is over. Except for Daniel's question, what about a cell when an alarm turns on automatically? Can you move the cell phone? The answer is it's still muktzah machmas chasar and kiss, and you would only be able to move it kalach yad. But even that, you have to be careful because you will have to make sure not to turn it off by your moving it. So it's kind of a difficult thing to do. I would not recommend using your alarm
Also,
on your
Mechamat Gufo,
phone.
Rabbi?
It's called muktzah machmas chasar and kiss. That's what it's called.
Can you move it with any type of shinoi, man? Or shinoi defka with
If it's turned off.
I mean, kalach yad,
shinoi?
kalach yad,
Like a shinoi?
back of your hand, elbow.
Needs a shinoi. Any something that you're not used to doing it? Like my 2 pinkies?
Yeah.
Rabbi, if you drop,
I'm not sure about pinkies.
I mean,
Not sure
literally
about
like this.
pinkies. Not sure. I think so. I'm not 100% sure.
Rabbi, but if it drop and then it's turned off, there's a big problem here. It's better not
Be
to touch
careful.
it.
You have to be careful.
Be careful.
Okay, my friends, with no further ado, we go on to finishing up Siman 253. The objective of today is to finish Siman Reish Nun Gimel and touch upon different topics related to putting things onto a blech, onto different heat sources, and perhaps moving things around on those heat sources. If we have time, we can start a review of Siman Reish Nun Gimel, but we'll see. Okay, so we're going to use the texts of the Mechaber and the Ramah, as we've been doing, as well as the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So, Siman Reish Nun Gimel, I believe we're at the Sif Dalid in the Mechaber. Sif Gimel. Actually, let's go back to Sif Gimel. I'm not sure if we did it. Sif Gimel in the Mechaber. I'm in the big Shulchan Aruch right now. A person who woke up in the morning and he saw that his pot was burning. The Yorapen Yagdiach Yossi was afraid that it might burn some more. Yochel lahasir, he can remove it. Ulaniach keder yeshana reikonis, and he can put down an old empty pot. Why does it have to be old? Because there's a halacha in Hilchas Yantiv. Exactly. There's a halacha in Hilchas Yantiv that if you have a new kli cheres, a new earthenware pot, you never used it before. Some say you're not allowed to use it on Yantiv for the first time to cook. On Shabbos you can't cook anyway, of course. But some say you cannot use it on Yantiv to cook for the first time in that pot because that is the makabeh patish. That strengthens the pot the first time you use it. So here on Shabbos, obviously you can't cook anything, but over here, you're not, it's an empty pot. You just want to put it there to cover the fire. So it could be that that's usher because you are strengthening the pot. There is a machloikus over there. Some say our pots today are different and they're stronger and they don't need strengthening, and therefore it's not makab b'patish. So therefore, but it's better not. Certainly better not. However, this only applies to clay cheres. It only applies to an earthenware pot, right? Ceramic, whatever it's called. It does not apply to a metal pot. All right? So you can put that down al piyakir in the mouth of the kira. The Mishnah Berurah points out, by the way, that in those days where the kira only had an opening on top, you could not smother the fire by completely covering it, obviously. You'll put the fire out, which is forbidden. So we're talking about a situation where you're covering it, but not smothering the fire. You're leaving some room for the air to get in. Then you will put the pot that the food is in on top of the empty pot. The Machaber instructs us, you should be careful not to put the pot on the ground in between, the burning pot. Should not put it on the ground in between. Make sure it's still hot when you put it back. Basically, the Machaber is instructing us to keep the conditions of Chazar when you return it onto the empty pot. Right? These are the conditions of Chazar that the Machaber holds up. Right? So it has to be hot. You can't put it down on the ground.
Why does he have that there?
Why? Because it's different than Seif Hey, where the Machaber says you're allowed to put something on top of a full pot, and he does not mention the conditions of Chazar. So he's differentiating between an empty pot and a full pot. You're not allowed to put something in an empty pot without the conditions of Chazar. Later on, we're going to see it on top of a full pot you can. So that's important. Without conditions, correct. We're doing in the Machaber Seif Gimel. I'm sorry? Alter Rebbe, we're going to come to soon. I don't know, 26 or something. Yesh limchos. You know what? I want to go through the Machaber all the way through Sif Hey because it's important to contrast between Sif Gimel and Sif Hey in terms of an empty pot or a full pot. Yesh limchos biyad hanoigim lahatmen v'ba'od yom kumkum shal mayim chamin v'noisnin oisam l'tech ha'gdeira v'sham b'shatav shal mitztamek. We discussed this last week. The Machaber says it is forbidden to take water from a kumkum, right, a hot kettle, thank you, and add it to the cholent on Shabbos. So if you have a burning cholent, according to the Machaber, the way to make it stop burning is simply to put it further away from the fire by putting a pot in between, but not by adding water. And we said that the reason, according to some Rishonim, is because the water that you're adding may not be Yatzelet Bay. But according to other Rishonim, even if it is Yatzelet Bay, but when you take it out of the pot, it loses the status of Kli Rishon. And then when it enters into the new pot, or the pot that's still on the fire, it's going back into a Kli Rishon, so it's like a higher level heat. So this is, by the way, only relevant according to the Machaber, who holds Yesh Bishul Achar Bishul Balach as soon as it's less than Yatzelet Bay. So therefore, you could say, well, even if it's still Yatzelet Bay, but it's not Kli Rishon, it's going to be stricter when it goes back into a Kli Rishon. However, the Ramah holds that if it's still hot enough to serve to your guests, and even though it's less than Yatzelet Bay, it's still considered Ein Bishul Achar Bishul, even though it's Lach. And therefore, according to the Ramah, this halacha does not apply. Because just like it's less than Yatzelet Bay, it's not a problem to reheat it. So too, if it's out of the Kli Rishon, it's not a problem to reheat it. And that's why actually the Alter Rebbe does not even bring down this halacha in his Shulchan Aruch, because it's for Ashkenazim, it's basically allowed. Yes? Question?
Allowed for what? To put water?
Allowed to put hot water with all the conditions of Chazara from one pot, a kettle, whatever, into the cholent.
If the blach, it will be the water in the blach in the
It needs to be in a blech, exactly, because the has to be covered, the fire has to be covered, still in your hand, all the things.
The chamin is called the yavesh or wet?
If it's burning,
No, it's
Yeah,
refrigerator.
What?
Chamin in refrigerator. It's called yavesh or dry. Oh, wait a minute.
I mean, most chamin has some liquid in it.
So
Maybe
you
it's-
cannot put it on the block on Shabbat?
No.
So what you can do, put in the block from the refrigerator?
You put a salt on the bottom.
Cholent has a lot of liquid in it.
Well, maybe it's different.
I mean, there is an opinion in the Minchas Kohen that you go by the majority.
I think that's what we do.
If it's a majority liquid, solid, then it's solid. There is such an opinion. So we'll get to that.
So basically
Minchas.
only rice and stuff like that?
It depends how you define liquid. Some say that a majority solid is considered solid. So we'll get to that in Shin Yuches in 318. I want to see what Daniel Kani says. The cell also has a GPS and might trigger some electronic reaction. I don't know. It's not discussed in the forum that I have looked into, so I don't know about that. If you move the cell phone on Shabbos, so the GPS is tracking it, so maybe just moving it from one side of the room to the other is causing some satellite to
What's happening if
take
it's off,
note of that
Rabbi?
movement.
What's happening if
I
it's
don't know.
off?
If it's off, it's off. It's still a Kli Shalach, it's still Muktzah. Still Muktzah.
But there's no issue about the
GPS.
internet.
I presume there's no GPS tracking if it's off. I presume. Though you never know with the spies out there. Okay. So let's read on in the Machaber before we go to the Alter Rebbe. Mutter loses al pikaderes chamin b'Shabbos tafshel shemizbashel me'erev Shabbos. Kol sorkol kegoin fandish uchayoytze ben lachamaman lefi she'en derech bishel bekach. So here is a more significant header than what we had in Siv Gimel. The Machaber says you're allowed to put on top of a cholent pot a tavshil that was completely cooked from before Shabbos. For example, a fandish. A fandish is some kind of meat pie, so it has like a breaded outside and like a meat inside.
So this one you took it from the refrigerator.
Exactly. Or the icebox in those days. And you could put it on there to heat up.
On the block.
On the fire, it doesn't say the blech. He says on a full pot. Because it's not derech bishul.
What does mean full pot?
Kederat chamin. Al
Where we have
gabe,
the block, Rabbi.
I'm reading the Machaber, and I'm telling you what the Machaber is saying. The Machaber says you're allowed to put this meat pie on top of the pot of chamin. This is not derech bishul.
Oh.
Meaning to say, the difference between this and Siv Gimel is that in Siv Gimel, because you're putting it into an empty pot, it is considered derech bishul. And therefore, if you don't keep the conditions of Chazara, it's like you're doing something that is similar to bishul, like a new shehiyah, which is similar to bishul, and that's forbidden. Whereas when you put it on top of a pot, that is not derech bishul. Nobody cooks on top of a pot. And therefore, all you have to be careful about is not to actually cook. Now, something that is fully cooked and dry is not actual cooking. And it doesn't look like cooking because that's not a normal place to cook.
So it's the same issue of the challah.
Same as a challah.
It's not
No matter how
it's
hot
not
the
bishul.
bottom's gonna be, as long as it's on top of the pot.
Correct. No matter how hot. And the proof to that is that if it wouldn't be hot, then it would be mutter anyway. Saying if you do put something on something that's not going to bring it to Yad Lettuce, it's not going to be a bishul or a mechzik kamavasha issue. So we're talking about a situation where it will come to Yad Lettuce, right? And it would therefore be asur if not for this pot. Nevertheless, with this pot, it's mutter.
Rabbi, the Mechaber said you put it inside the chamin or at the top of the
On top.
on top of this.
Inside, we already said you can't do. Actually, inside we said you can't do. Yeah, I mean, inside is chazara. Inside is like chazara. You need to keep the conditions of chazara. If you want to put something inside a pot that's on fire, that's a normal place to cook. You can only do that with the conditions of chazara.
Chazara, when you pick it up like this,
All the
when it's still
conditions.
hot.
All the conditions. And even that, the Machaber would not allow you to put in something liquid, because as soon as it comes out, it cools down. Something solid you could actually, according to the Machaber, if you have a hot kugel, on your blech or whatever, you want to put it inside a cholent pot, why not? Keep the conditions of Chazar. It's hot and it's solid, so the whole thing about it cooling down on the way doesn't apply.
What's the difference between this and what I asked you? If I serve something and I didn't use the one put back in, and it's still hot, you told me no.
You've served something, and what? It's in a ladle.
No, I serve on a plate. It's too much.
It's on a
And
plate.
then only four
Oh,
minutes,
it's on
I
a
serve
plate.
back.
Oh, it's on a plate. It's already out of the. That's you didn't keep the conditions.
But the cooker, it's also it's not in the same.
No, I'm talking about you take it straight out. No, put it down on anything in between. Once you put it on a plate, then it's no good. It's there. Pina mimech mamech.
From the same part. Now it's taking something from different part and put it in another part. So it's completely.
Yeah, on the top of you, before we talked about the top.
No. If you put it from one pot to another, that's one of the conditions of Chazar that the Alter Rebbe holds is no good. A condition of Chazar has to be in the original pot.
So you're taking a Google that
Right.
was in a different
Yeah, but you didn't put it in a different pot. You took it straight out of the.
one pot to another pot.
Exactly, to another pot on the fire. That's allowed. That's allowed. The proof to that
But
is,
you asked it because the cooker is still hot. But if the cooker is not on the blech or off the blech, but you just remove it, and you put it in.
We said in the refrigerator.
one more time, what? If what?
You took the cooker,
Off the blech.
and now you're taking the piece and you put it into the challah.
What's the difference?
So it's have to be on the fire while you're actually doing the transaction between one to the other.
How could it be?
No, it doesn't have to be on the fire. Take it off as long as you keep the conditions. The conditions of Chazar are that it's still hot, that you have it in your hand, and that you intend to put it back. It's fully cooked. All the conditions. It doesn't have to be on top of the blech. It's not like a magic thing that you can't move it from the
So let me
blech.
ask you, so I said 5 plates. The 5th plate actually it's in my hand because I'm holding the plate, serving from the challah. Okay, I realize it's one extra.
Now good.
The plate's in my hand.
The plate is pina mimechem lemechem. It's two separate conditions. There's a condition that you cannot put it down, and there's a condition that has to be in the original pot. Pina mimechem lemechem is one of the conditions that the Gemara says is a teiku, is a question, if it's okay or not. And the Alter Rebbe and the Magen Avraham are strict about that.
Even if it's hot.
Even if it's hot, that's another condition. They're all separate conditions. All separate conditions. A plate is a second clean.
But we're not holding that something mutzak. Even if it's clay sheni, have the dinner like clear rishon because it's still mutzak. You learned it.
We may have learned it, and we will learn it more, maybe even today. But that's not going to help for Chazar. Because the point is, that helps for temperature. What Ronnie is saying, I just want to bring to everybody's attention, is that some people hold that when a solid piece comes out of the pot that it's in, it retains the din of a kli rishon, as opposed to liquid that is poured out of the original pot that it was heated in. When you pour it out, it becomes a kli sheni. Well, in the air, it's an irui. It's called an irui. It's like a pour. And then when it lands in another kli, it becomes a kli sheni. And it doesn't have the power to cook anymore, besides some exceptions. But generally, it doesn't have the power to cook anymore. Some say that a davar gush, a solid piece, even after you take it out, and even after you put it down in another keli, still maintains the power to cook like a kli rishon. Because the whole idea of a kli sheni not cooking is that the walls cool it off. So that only applies to a liquid which spreads out on the walls and gets cooled down by it. But a solid that just sits there, so it doesn't get affected as much by the kli sheni, and it retains the din of a kli rishon. So that's how some achronim, I think it's machlokes achronim. I don't think it's based on the Rishonim. That's how some achronim pass on.
It's all in the B'shad Kotzah.
Yep.
There doesn't be a problem to put in at any time in the B'shad. something will shop over the right?
So I'm talking about, according to the poskim that hold that a blech is considered a makam of bishul. I'm talking according to the poskim that hold that you cannot put anything on a blech without the conditions of chazar. So for people that hold that a blech is not a normal place to cook, right? Rabbi Yosef holds that you don't have to keep the conditions. You just have to make sure that it's fully cooked, and in terms of liquid, that it's still hot. That's it. So this whole discussion wouldn't be relevant unless it's like I don't know, on an open fire or something like that. I don't know. So, but according to those that say you need to keep the conditions on a blech, so here's the thing. So Ronnie is asking, why can you take the blech, the kugel off the plate, because it doesn't have a din of a kli sheni, it has a din of a kli rishon, and put it into the pot? The answer is that over here we're not concerned with the din of kli rishon and kli sheni, because we're not concerned with the power of cooking that this kugel has. To cook, to be cooked, we're not talking about that. We're concerned with mechzik mavashal, that it should look like it's cooking or not. So the conditions of chazara are to ensure that it should not look like a new shehiyah, but it should look like a continuation. So as long as it's in the original pot, or at least not put down in a second pot, it's considered like a continuation of the earlier shehiyah. It doesn't look like a new shehiyah. So it's considered chazara as opposed to a new shehiyah. But if you put it in a different pot, then it's like it might appear like a new shehiyah. This is not the same thing. This is something new, you understand? So it's not about the levels of temperature and cooking, whatever. It's a different thing.
So when you're serving more than once, let's say using the serving spoon, okay? Each time you're taking this leftover on the serving spoon, now you're putting it back inside the toilet and take more. So what about the leftovers that you have on the serving spoon that you put in back in? So
I don't know if that little amount is mechzik and mavashal. It's like, it's nothing. Shtuyot. I don't think so. First of all, some say that a serving spoon gets a din of a kli rishon because it goes into it. That's what some say. But second of all, it's also I saw this argument. I saw this argument in Rav Wosner, in Rabbi Farkash, that small amount doesn't look like bishul. The whole thing over here is not actual bishul, right? Because it's still hot, it's fully cooked. The whole thing is mechzik mavashal. It looks like a new shehiyah. So a little bit on the edge of a spoon doesn't look like a new thing. That's his far. I'm sure he got it from somewhere. 1 second, let's just see what Rabbi Kahani says. He also didn't intend to put it back initially. He was going to serve it and then realized it was extra. Shomeh? Daniel says it was not daite lahachzir. It's missing another condition. He didn't intend to put it back. Different than the kugel where I'm talking about a case where you intended to put it, took it with intent to put it. So that's different. Question?
Yes, we spoke before about you go to the refrigerator, you take some food, I'm not sure what's that, and you put it on the top of the pot.
What food is that? It's fully cooked salad food.
Salad food.
Yeah,
And this what he's talking about, salad food also, right?
Yeah, but he's not talking about on top of a pot. He's talking about in a pot. In a pot is mechzik and mavashal.
So
That's
if
what you need the
he
conditions.
can take that from that to another pot on the top, no
On
problem.
the top, no problem. On the top, you don't need the conditions, as long as it's fully cooked and still hot if it's liquid. If it's dry, it could be cold. Okay, my friends, with no further ado, let us go over these halachas of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch.
One more question.
Yep.
You said the full pot versus the empty pot. A leftover empty pot would be the same as a full pot, right?
Rabbi Farkash has some discussion about that, but the Shmir Shabbos says yes, that an empty pot is the same, turned over empty pot is the same as a full pot. Okay. In the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, we are on Chavav 26. We did just the Mechaber of Hay. The Ramah is a little bit lengthy. We're going to get to that.
I do have.
Actually, I'm sorry, Yossi?
I have a question.
Yes. How is London doing, by the way?
Well, it depends on your perspective. If you're used to hanging out in Israel, it's not very exciting. If you're used to hanging out in Western countries, then people are a little bit concerned, but not overly concerned.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a few casualties in a city of over 10 million.
Right. Still scary, but okay, I hear you. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
So for Shabbos, I often use my oven and I time it to go off before we're eating. So usually I time it to go off about the time I get home from shul.
Uh-huh.
Everything in there is extremely hot. I usually leave my oven on, let's say, 95 degrees, which means that by the time I eat it, it's probably about 85 degrees.
Okay.
As soon as my oven goes off, would I actually be allowed to put something from that oven onto a blech?
That's an interesting question.
What's the question again?
If the oven has already turned off, but it's still at a high temperature, can he put it from the oven onto the blech? What's the answer, my friends?
It's still,
For Ashkenazim.
it's still hot somewhat. Wow.
Well, is he keeping the conditions of Chazor?
Why wouldn't you?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't have in mind that he wants to put it in the oven.
Well, he never took it out of the oven yet. It's in the oven now, and he wants to take it out of the oven and put it onto the blech. Still in the oven, that one's still hot. The only thing is that it's off.
We said if it's still on, it's still on, it's right now it's off, but it's still hot inside. So it is considered for hot.
That's correct. An oven, even if it's off, if it's still hot, it's the same as if it's on, the halacha. In other words, just like in those days, they had the concept of grufa. They could take out the coals, and it was still considered hot, and it had all the halachas of shehiyah and chazara and so on and so forth, even though the coals were removed. So the same thing applies over here. Even though the oven is off, you wouldn't be allowed to put into it because it's still hot. And conversely, because it's still hot, you could take from it and put it somewhere else because it's still considered in a heat source. So you can move from one to the other.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
how we know
Yeah.
if the blach is the same temperature of the oven because you taken one to the other? This is another question.
Doesn't have to be the same temperature. Doesn't have to be the same temperature.
Hot is good enough.
Yatsa lettuce boy is good enough, and according to Ashkenazim, even less than Yatsa lettuce boy if it's hot enough to serve to guests. Now, if it goes down to less than Yatsa lettuce boy, I have another chiddush for you. I said this chiddush already, so I'll repeat the chiddush that I said once in the name of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that if a blech goes off, he was talking about a blech, right? A plata, whatever, something, not an oven, but it's the same concept. If it goes off, so even if it's cold, if the food is still hot, so maybe it's allowed still to put it on a different blech. Why? Because it's not like a nicha al gabe karka. In other words, when you take it out and you put it down, so it's like you put it down, you did an action showing finished, this is where it belongs. But over here, you didn't take it out, you left it in, and you wanted it to be. It's not you left it in. You didn't even know that it was off. You understand what I'm saying? He's talking about a case where it turned off by mistake.
Electric jump off.
Exactly. Whatever happened, the Shabbos clock was wrong. Whatever. So he considers that perhaps. He has a discussion about it, but perhaps he wants to argue that it's like oida biyad. It's like you're holding it in your hand, because where it is showing you that you want it to be on a heat source. So that's something you can rely on. Perhaps.
Just.
Just before Shabbos, the raw meat inside. Okay, for the next day.
No.
Okay. Short time after Shabbos coming in, the fire went off. Everything's still hot. And shouldn't have to eat FPL, put the fire back on. You're allowed to eat it.
Yeah.
Maybe we should offer because they go put the fire back on, put the fire on.
That's a complicated
You
shaila.
put the food in, why would you shana? If you cook the food, the going to travel fire.
Whatever you cooked it wasn't a third cooked yet. Went off. Then it went back
What
on.
was it?
Why did the lights go off instead of night? That was the case?
No, it doesn't matter. 10 minutes after.
As far as Hilchos Shabbos is concerned, it's no problem because he didn't do it for you. He did it for everybody. You know what I mean? That's not a shayla. As far as Bishul Akum is concerned,
Do they actually come to your house?
No, automatically with the
it's a button, a wire, who knows what.
They press a button with them, their lights turn on.
I mean, there is a halacha in Hilchos Bishul Akum about a goy who heats up an oven for the sake of drying out kalim. You know, you have sometimes you have pottery, whatever. But he knows that you have food in there, then it's considered Bishul Akum. Even though he did it to dry out kalim, but because he knows you have food in there, it's considered Bishul Akum. But I don't know if it's the same, because over there, after all, he did an action of heating an oven. You know what I mean? Here, he did an action of electricity, which has 1,000 uses. One of them is the oven. I don't know if that's going to be considered Bishul Akum. I don't know. It's a shaila. But my thought is that it's not, because it's not a direct action of Bishul. That's my thought.
Just now, Papa, and a question for me now about that. You got Oracle, all the electric is off.
Yeah.
And then on Shabbat, and you got automatic generator working on, and you put the blach on. You're allowed to put the food over there, like you can serve before Shabbat? Or if it's the...
It's no different than if it was on from before. What's the difference?
Okay, so
Okay. 26 in the Alter Rebbe. Hamashkim abayke v'rosh egdichet avshila yishev egdeh shalpi akir she'en gufa uktuma she'isha ala v'echa b'darke heter shespar l'mayla. U'mis pen yagdiach yoiser. Our rabbis give the following advice. When a person adhering to one of the permitted modes described above left food in a pot on a range whose glowing coals had neither been removed nor covered, and he awakened on Shabbos morning and saw that the food had burned, fearing that it would burn further, he may do the following. Now, of course, this heter applies if the fire is covered too. The chiddush is that even though the fire is not covered, putting down the empty pot is going to make it covered. What do you need, the link? I sent it out, yeah. It's in your email.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, I have it in the Hebrew here if you want. Here we are. Fearing that it will burn further, he may do the following. Yochel lahasir agder me'akira, ulaniach keder yishon harikanas al pi akira, v'lo yichadosh mitam she'izbor b'sim tov kol beis, v'az yos magder she'betashel b'seichel gam be'agder harikanas. Then can it's masha masa b'shabbos l'kir she'neguf uktuma to kim chak deira harikanas. So semas pi akira tachas agder she'atashel b'seichel is a keguf uktuma. He may remove the pot from the range, place an empty pot that has been used previously over the opening to the range, and then place the pot containing the cooked food on top of the empty pot. He should not place a new pot over the opening of the range for the reason to be explained in section 502. In this instance, there is no prohibition against returning the pot on Shabbos to a range whose glowing coals are neither removed nor covered. Since the empty pot located below the pot containing the food covers the opening to the range, it is as if the coals of the range were removed or covered. I'm not sure about his translation here. It's a literal translation, but I'm not sure if that's what Alter Rebbe means. He says he should not place in this instance. Where is it? on top of the empty pot. What does that mean, on top of the empty pot? Does he literally mean on top? Sorry? The Hebrew is agabe, which is pretty much on top. I think it means inside of it. When he says on top of, he means on it. It's empty, he's putting it on it. Not on the top of it, on it. On the empty pot. Sorry? 26 in the Alter Rebbe.
Inside the pot.
Inside the pot. I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Because, you know what, let's read a little bit further, because the Alter Rebbe explains what's the difference between an empty pot and a full pot. Okay, so let's see. V'chein mutar litin tavshel b'Shabbos al pi kedei eschamen hatmuna al gabei esha b'kir al derech shesbar b'sim reish nun zayin. Av b'sheyas led hashamein chayshon l'chitu b'kolam kemin shagdim avsekas ben tavshel zel ha'gachol. Similarly, it's permitted on Shabbos to place a cooked dish over the opening of a pot of cholent, whose heat is being preserved in a fire of a range in the manner to be explained in section 257, even though it is so hot that the hand will recoil from its heat. There is no concern that one might stir the coals, since there's another pot intervening between the food and the coals. So this is the case of Sif Hay in the Mechaber Shulchan Aruch. You have a full pot of cholent. It's on top of an open flame. Nevertheless, you can take any food, right? That's no problem with bishul because it's fully cooked, and you can put it on top of that pot. The pot itself acts as the covering of the coals. Okay, now, no. This is a full pot. Now we're talking about a full pot. V'chein mutar. This is the second case. V'chein mutar litin tavshel b'Shabbos al pi kederes chamin. You're putting it on top of a kederes chamin, on top of a cholent pot. This is Sif Hay from the Mechaber. I'm in the middle of Sif Chavav. Va'afilu. Yeah? Alright? Va'afilu im heiser tavshel zeh ma'akim b'boy yoim v'lehaya b'dayt la'achzira v'nichal gabei karka afilu pinam g'dei lektera afilu tavshel yoshem v'etztana legamri. Now the Alter Rebbe goes through all the possible conditions of chazara that you're not going to keep, even if you took it off of the pot before Shabbos, off the fire before Shabbos, right? Which the Ran says, well, that's much worse. On Shabbos, you have to keep the condition. No, you took it off before. You had no intent to put it back. You put it on the ground. You change it from pot to another. And it's cold. It's completely cold. But there is no bishul issue because it doesn't have any liquid. Even though if you're missing any of these conditions, you can't put it back onto a kira that's covered. When you put it on top of a pot that's on top of the coals of the kira, then it does not look like you're cooking because that's not the normal way to cook. All right? So far, so good?
Yeah, but I don't see how it suggests that you can't put it into an empty pot. What he says is because it doesn't look like cooking, because putting one pot on top of another does not look like cooking.
Yep.
And he goes, so I don't see that it seems mistranslated. And he goes on to say that basically any covering of any sort will do.
Where does he go on to say that?
About half an hour.
To the above?
Yes.
All right, let's read that for argument's sake. Sha'af emene gor for kotum chintana beisachorev shem gor for kotum. Afilo ish mesoichem mutter litin agav b'Shabbos. Av b'shiyas l'sham kol shemutter kol ma shemutter litin agav b'kdeira hatmuna agav b'chol kevich ma'aziva mafsekas ben aish l'akdeir shatashal b'soich.
Yeah.
According to the above, it is possible to say that on Shabbos, any food that is permitted to be placed on a pot whose heat is being preserved by coals may be placed on top of the ovens of the present age, which have a covering, or may be placed on top of a winter heating stove, even if its coals were not removed or covered, and if there's a fire burning within them, and even if the hand were to cool from there. Since the covering separates between the fire and the pot containing the food, returning the food is permitted because this is not the way in which one cooks. Okay, here, this is the argument the Alter Rebbe presents, which is based on the Magen Avraham. Nowadays, we have ovens that have an inside and a door on the side and a covering on the top. In those days, right, the covering, the ovens were open on top. That's where you would put things in them. Nowadays, our ovens have a covering on the top, the top of the oven. Nowadays, a lot of our ovens have stovetops on the top. That's something else. But in those days, they didn't have these stovetop things. They had oven. Top of the oven, there was whatever the top of the oven was, metal or cheres, I don't know what it was. So the argument can be made that just like you can put something on top of a pot without any conditions of chazara, because that's not a normal place to cook, so too you could put things on top of the oven without any conditions of chazara, because that's not a normal place to cook.
They used to put it inside.
They used to put it inside, correct. And the top would not be hot enough to cook. It might be hot enough to keep it warm, which is what you want to do, basically, but not hot enough to cook. So since it's not a normal place to cook, you should be allowed to put there without any conditions. Yes.
I have the question about the מכל מקום שמונה יכול לגבי הקדרה שעל גבי הגחלים. זאת אומרת, he put it on the גחלים, and 1 month ago we studied, if you move anything on the gechalim, maybe you make a fire.
We discussed it. We already put it to bed.
Okay.
We discussed that.
But here is bringing a put it on the gechalim. You're waking me up.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about putting a pot on top of the pot that's on the gechalim. How are you going to get the bottom part of the gechalim out? You'll have to learn it. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about putting something on top of that pot.
The next one, but this one here. He said, בכל מקום שמנוחה על גבי הקדרה שעל גבי הגחלים. על
גבי הקדרה שעל גבי הגחלים. פה יש לך קדרה שעל גבי הגחלים. איך תוציא את זה? תלמד. למדנו באמת. למדנו כבר. עכשיו אנחנו עוסקים לתת על גבי הקדרה הזאת. זה הדיון. Okay. Sorry, you guys didn't see my... Here we are. Yeah. This is on the gechalim, this is on top of that. Next. That was the first case. The second case is there's already a full pot there, and you want to put on top of that pot. Yeah. Oh, so how are you not touching the gechalim? That's a question. I assume.
Why is emphasized that it has to be new and not old and not new?
Because if it's new, then you're maybe doing makkah b'patish. You're strengthening it. We said that before. You're strengthening it. Tikkun kli. The first time you use a kli cheres, a kedera, that's a cheres. It strengthens it. Regarding to translation, are we talking about the difference in al gabe and just al? On versus on top. No, it's not about al or al gabe. I think it's the question is, does he mean on top of the pot or does he mean on the pot? Does he mean on the pot? I'm talking about the first case, the kedera rekonis.
So why does it make a difference? They're both unusual ways of cooking.
I'm sorry?
They're both unusual ways of cooking.
Right. I mean, you never cook in a pot unless you're melting chocolate or something. So, but yeah, usually that's an unusual way to cook. That is true.
With water in between, we're talking about doing it dry, which
that's true.
Is weird.
That's true. It is weird. That is true. That is true. Let me just finish the sif and then I'll explain to you how the Alter Rebbe tries to differentiate between the two. תחס הגדר להפסיק בין לגחלים שבתנור כדי שלא יהקר בזה ולא יהיה בלחתס, אבל מזיבה שעשויה מכבר אין חשוב להפסיק להקר למונה בלחתס וכן עיקר. Okay, here's an interesting thing, Alter Rebbe says. based on the Moran Avram. I'm sorry?
Basically a blech.
Basically a blech, exactly. If you want to put it on top of the oven of those days, the Alter Rebbe says you should not put it directly there. This is what the explanation seems to be. Because it is not an unusual place to heat things, and there is nothing to remind you not to stoke the coals inside the oven. Even though you have the top of the oven literally there in between, but the fact is that's always there, so that's not going to remind you, right? We've said many times that the point of covering the coals or removing them is not that the cover itself is going, actually I take it back. What it turns out is that there is something else. There is something else. When we spoke about covering the coals or removing the coals, we spoke about the fact that it is going to show that you don't need the heat of these coals so much, and therefore you're not going to stoke them on Shabbos. But here we see that there's another point, that by covering it, you have something that is there reminding you not to stoke the coals. This is where the whole discussion comes about covering the knobs or not, right? Nowadays, we have knobs and we have heat source. So you cover the heat source. You also have to cover the knobs or not. So the main thing is we said the heat source because that minimizes it and shows that you're not so interested in it. But here we see that there's something else, that you should have something unusual there so that if you would want to if you might forget and try to change it, that will remind you. So here, even though the fire is covered, you can't see it. It's on top. Fire is inside. This is on top. But because there's nothing unusual there to remind you not to stoke, you might still forget and stoke. And that's why the recommendation is to put something extra down in between.
So, Rabbi, is the same issue when I am eating here meat and you did it there and you put something between to remind you?
Regarding
Similar.
the Rebbe, saying that you should remove the pot and put an empty pot.
Yep.
And then on top of this pot, put the pot with the fruit.
Yep.
Basically, by doing it, you're showing that you don't need the fire so much. It's not the same concept that you mentioned with the blech, that if you put a blech and then you just raise or
The same.
temperature, so
The same.
how can I,
Makabel?
how we allow it?
You're allowing it. What do you mean? You just said. You're covering it. You're showing you don't need the fire. Bakasha, now put it back. This pot is like you covering the coals. So what's the problem?
It's only Shabbos.
So what? You're not putting them out. You're not putting them out. Is that what you're asking? It has to be a case where you're not putting them out.
Put the pot on top of the color.
No, you're not putting it directly. It has to be like a metal frame or something to block it, or it's on top of the kira. Here's the thing: you have the kira. The coals are here. The pot, you're sitting it on top of it. You understand? You're sitting it on top of it. You're not putting it down there. You're sitting it on top of it. You understand? So it's not actually touching the gechalim. And now you're putting the other one on top of that. I think so.
So basically, the first one you're saying not touching the gechalim is directly.
Touching the gechalim is going to be like the mavir.
It's upside down the pot and putting it on top of that pot.
No, I'm talking about if there is no pot there yet. You have just coals. And now you want to put an empty pot directly on those coals, you're going to be moving them. That's going to be mavir. Okay. The cover of the top of the oven is there all the time. It doesn't remind you. That's the main halacha. Nevertheless, before the oven was heated, the minhag is to put on it without any interruption, even though it will be heated when it gets heated later. And then there's suspicion he might stoke. You don't have to stop them because they have on whom to rely.
This is
Okay.
when you talk about putting the blech on after you've turned the stove on, right?
This is talking about putting food on a winter oven, which is generally used for heating the house. And the guy is going to come on Shabbos morning, and he has a heter, or you have a heter, to have him come and turn your and heat up your oven because it's very cold, because you're living in Russia or who knows where, Poland, whatever, cold countries, and it's dangerous. So there is a absolutely valid heter for him to heat up that winter oven. So once it's already hot, for you to put it on, we said, because you don't have anything to remind you there not to stoke, is the halacha is you can't. However, before he comes on Shabbos morning, so at that moment you're not going to stoke anything because there's nothing to stoke. So you put it there. There's no reminder, and he'll come and he'll stoke and he'll heat it up. You could say, well, now that he heats it up, and your food is there, maybe you'll come now and stoke it. Okay, you could argue that, but you could also argue that after all, the fire is covered. There is a covering in between, even though it's always there, but it is after all, in between, so maybe it is successfully covering the fire. It's a bit of a question, but because you didn't put it on when it was hot, so there was no shaila at that time, so therefore we're going to allow it. Or at least we're not going to stop those that do it. You understand?
So can I use an electric stove with a time switch, with a blech on top of it and a pot on top of that?
I don't understand why you need the time switch. If you have a top, you mean?
Let's say I don't want it to burn. Let's say I just want it. I have a soup, and I put it on a blech on top of an electric stove, and I set the timer to go on an hour before my Shabbos meal.
So this is not a shehiyah shaila. This is a general bishul shaila. You're not putting it on Shabbos. You're talking about leaving it on from before Shabbos and having the timer turn it on. Is that your question?
Well, yeah. I had no idea that such a thing could be done until I read this.
Actually, Reb Moshe does not hold of it. Reb Moshe is very much against timers, and he only allows it by lights because everybody does it already, and he can't stop them. So, and a lot of people have accepted that shita. I know others are makel about it, and let's leave it for today. Moshe holds that you shouldn't be allowed to use any timers because it's like you can't have a goy work for you on Shabbos. You can't have a keli that starts to do work for you on Shabbos. You can't set up a keli to work for you on Shabbos. If it's working from before Shabbos, so that's shayach to before Shabbos. No, the timer is not working. No, the timer is working, but the oven is not working. Oven's not working. The oven starts working on Shabbos. Same thing. What's the difference? The oven lights. What's the difference? It wasn't on before Shabbos. It starts going on Shabbos. He holds that is.
The lights are already on, and at midnight it's going off, and then at 10 o'clock in the morning it's turning back on.
I'm saying everybody does it, and Reb Moshe doesn't say to stop it. He says that they already do that. We're not going to stop them, but for everything else he says not to do. Anyway, not everybody agrees with that, but let's not spend too much time on that today because it's a discussion on its own.
So basically, according to this if a person left his pot on top of the fire, does Shabbos already in, you can pick it up, put it back, and put the pot back on it?
Absolutely. If it's fully cooked.
Only if it's cooked.
Yeah. It's not fully cooked, he can't.
60%.
Once he picks it up, he can't put it back down.
60%, Rabbi?
Fully means 100%.
Okay, so only 100%.
Not 99, 100%. Now, he doesn't have to, because once it's fully cooked, what's the point of putting the blech down? Fully cooked. It's burning, of course it's fully cooked. It's beyond fully cooked. There's no such thing. Burning before it's cooked. Doesn't exist. Okay, I have to borrow that for a moment, if you don't mind, because I want to tell you the Alter Rebbe's explanation of the difference between the empty pot and the full pot. The first suggestion the Alter Rebbe has is a very interesting one, and it's based on the Ran. Basically, the Machaber in Sif Gimel talks about a fanadish. It's a meat pie. So there is an argument put forth in the Ran that when you put something that is normally cooked in a certain way, you put it to heat up in a different way, that does not look like cooking. For example, on a blech, you don't cook a challah on a stove. A meat pie also, you don't cook it on a stove. You bake it in the oven. So maybe that's the reason why the Machaber is more strict in Siv Gimel than in Siv Hey. Because in Siv Hey, he's talking about a meat pie which you don't cook on top of something. You have to cook it inside of something. And therefore it doesn't look like cooking. Maybe that's one argument. But the Alter Rebbe rejects that because the Machaber and the Beis Yosef does not seem to agree with the Ran. He quotes him, but he doesn't agree with him. So we're left with understanding the difference between an empty pot and a full pot. The Alter Rebbe has two possible explanations. One is Toich Hakdeira Harikonis Gora Tfei. The Kutchus.
Hello again. Have we lost the audio? We've lost him entirely, it seems.
All right, here we are.
We're back to normal.
We're back. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, good, good.
By the way, is it possible we're talking about panadas as opposed to pandesh or whatever you said?
You still left that sure before, or it's a set? Automatically, Rabbi?
Yeah, it should be saved, I think. I think it's a continuation, actually. Here we are. All right. Ta-da. Okay, so that's one explanation. Yeah, it's working. Thank you, thank you. That's one explanation. Another one is that another one is the hada gar tfei b'kdei kanat hayna mishum shu kekira shakira hu makam aroy lebishul betchila. The difference between inside a pot and on top of a pot is that the inside of a pot is a place that is roy lebishul betchila. It's a place that is fit for cooking in the first place. So, according to that explanation, it's not so clear exactly what the Alter Rebbe means, but inside a pot is like that's a place that you normally cook, whereas on top of a pot you don't normally cook. So the same argument can be made. The Alter Rebbe says for on top of an oven is not a place you normally cook. So, in terms of on top of an empty pot, it would also seem it's not a place you normally cook. So, it would seem that an empty pot that you're putting stuff on top of it is okay. That's what it would seem. Okay, Chav Zayin. If you're what, sorry?
If you're going to go to the one in this thing, putting the pot inside the other pot, want to be like a mana?
No. It's not going to be Hatmana. Hatmana only applies to something that you can put snug. A pot, yeah, it has to be a material that you can insulate with, something that you can put directly, like soft, something soft, not hard. Doesn't apply to cloth exactly, cotton, coals, sand, all the things we're going to learn about in Reish Nun Zayin. But a pot is not fit for that, and an oven is also not fit for that. So we're going to see about it.
Even though, like, if I'm putting one on top of another, the weight, then you're causing the bottom one, the pressure to build because
Pressure to build in terms
pressure to
of
build because it's adiabatic, constant volume. You're keeping the volume constant, so the pressure goes up.
total pressure.
Therefore, it cooks more. Because
It's a lot of cook more. It's a lot of cook more. It's a lot of cook
it's
more.
allowed to cook more.
Yeah, if something is yasa lettuce boy, you can make it cook more. You can make it. You can move it around closer to the fire. On Shabbos, something fully cooked. As long as it's still hot, you can make it cook more. I'm saying you can make it get hotter.
Make it get, then what's Atmana itself? Isn't that making
Atmana
it
is
get
insulating,
hotter?
yeah.
But it
it's
makes
not,
it get hotter, right?
Yeah, but it's not about making it get hotter. It's about insulating in particular, which is similar to insulating in coals, which could lead to stoking the coal. So it's specifically insulating. Okay. Okay. According to our custom, it is, however, permitted in all instances to place food near a winter oven. I'm reading 27. whose glowing coals were not removed or covered, even if there's a fire burning inside as explained above. It is only that the food must still be somewhat warm if it contains liquid, and the place near the oven where it is put down is warm enough to cause the hand to recover from its heat. If, however, the place near the oven is not warm enough to cause the hand to recover from its heat, it is permitted to place food there in all situations, and the food has become entirely cool as explained above. Okay, putting things near an oven, also, you don't have to have any conditions of chazor. If it's hot enough to bring it to Yatzel Boy, you have to have the conditions of bishul, which is it has to be fully cooked, and if it's liquid, it has to still be hot. If it's not even hot enough to do that, then there's no conditions at all. So
that means you could put a liquid next to the that oven?
As long as it's not going to be able to heat it up to the point of Yatzel Boy, where it's too hot to touch.
Is it because it's not a normal oven, it's like a boiler type thing?
No.
So there's an extra.
No, the fact that you're putting it on the side is not a place to cook. It's not a normal place to cook. That itself is the heck. Now, even if you know that the guy is going to come and heat up this oven, nevertheless, if you know that the guy is going to heat up this oven in order to heat up the house, which is permissible on Shabbos in the way that will be explained in Siman Reish Ayin Vav, which is that if you're a place that is very cold, you're allowed to have a guy heat up the oven on Shabbos. You can even tell him to because it's dangerous. Now, you have an oven, and it's already cooled down, because in those days, what could you do? Before Friday, you filled it up with wood, and then in the course of the night, it cooled. You got up in the morning, still a little bit warm, but not so warm. So now you want to heat up your water a bit. You put it next to the oven. Right now, this water is not going to get Yatzel Boy, no matter how long you leave it there. On the other hand, when the guy comes in the morning and heats it up to heat up the house for heat, which is allowed, that is going to get very hot, and it's going to heat up this water. Now you have a problem. Because the Gemara says, Echad Nosan Es Ha'etzim, Echad Nosan Es HaKedeira, V'echad Nosan Es HaMayim, V'echad Nosan Es HaEish, Kulam Peturim V'acharon Chayiv. One person came along and put some wood down. Another person came and put a pot. Another person added water to the pot. Another last person came along and lit the fire underneath it. The last person is chayev, and all of them are exempt.
So,
Whoa. What does exempt mean? Exempt means pater aval aser. They are pater from punishment, but what they did was forbidden. Because after all, they participated in an act of cooking. They helped an act of cooking take place, even though they didn't do the actual final thing that made it cook. So the same thing here. If you know that the guy is going to heat it up, you cannot participate in that act by putting down something there that will heat up.
Rabbi, so he will be patur from onish, but he cannot touch the food. But let's say if I come in the synagogue and I can take something, I didn't know anything about that food.
You're asking if he can eat the food?
No, we said if someone put the food next to the fire, and we know he knows that tomorrow the guy come over and he make a fire, put back more wood so it will be hot.
Is it also to eat?
Also to eat for him.
We didn't say that.
We said we
didn't say it.
He will not get punished, but he will be chayav because he's part of the cooking.
We didn't say the food is asr.
Oh.
I didn't say the food is asr. I said it's pater aval asr. What he did was a forbidden act. He's pater from punishment. We don't stone him, but what he did is a forbidden act. Is the food also asr? I think it is, if he did it on purpose. Halacha is if a person does an Isser Shabbos, that is Derabonan, b'mezid, then it's also to eat on that Shabbos.
For him or for everybody?
Not sure. I think for everybody. I think for everybody, if he did it on purpose. If he did it by accident, then it's mutter, both for him and for everybody. So that's what I think it would be over here. It's an Issa D'Rabbanan. If he did it on purpose, it would be aser. If he did it by accident, it would be mutter. I think. Megis in a food that is not yet fully cooked. Fully cooked is D'Rabbanan. Fully cooked is D'Rabbanan. Okay, so we continue and we say.
You're allowed to move the one block.
Yeah.
The issue is going to be certain areas going to be harder than the other one.
Yeah.
You're allowed to move the block from one corner to the other corner, according to the heat of the water.
Yeah. If it's fully cooked, you can move it from one side to the other. Yeah. If it's not, you can move it to a lower heat,
But not to a higher.
not to a higher heat. Correct. Okay.
But the low one has to be more than tolerable, or
No. You can move it off completely. Lama lo. You want your food to be less than fully cooked, you can take it off. You just can't put it back on. It's no problem.
no. Even if it's fully cooked, even if the area, one area, it's less than tolerable.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
You're allowed to.
That's an interesting question. I was reading about that in Rabbi Farkash today. Rabbi Farkash wants to, Rabbi Farkash quotes Rabbi Feinstein of Moshe. Rabbi Moshe says that if your pot is fully cooked and it's on the blech, but it's on a part of the blech that is not Yad Tzeleres Boy, he says you could still move it over to the part that is Yad Tzeleres Boy.
So it's all considered one pot.
Because
One
he
pot.
considers it that it's not on the karka. It's still in the place of cooking. I guess it's like it's in your hand, kind of. What's the pshat? It's in your hand. When it's in your hand, everybody knows that it's going back. So here it's on the same thing. Everybody knows it's going back. That's his argument. Rabbi Farkash is not so convinced about that. He wants to argue if it's in a place that's not Yad Tzeleres Boy, so it's not in a place of cooking anymore, even if it's the same piece of metal, but it's not in a place of cooking anymore. So it should be considered like the ground. A metal that's not Yad Tzeleres Boy should be like the ground, even if it's connected to the part that is Yad Tzeleres Boy, but it's not, it in itself is not Yad Tzeleres Boy. It's certainly lachatchila, it's better not. Maybe b'diavad.
It's more than tolerable, there's no issue.
More than Tzeleres Boy is no problem, correct. Okay. Now is when we get into some interesting things.
So who is the for Rabbi Farkash or Rabbi Moshe Feinstein?
מי אני להכריע בין ההרים הגדולים האלה?
ברוך השם.
מה אני אגיד לך?
זה קונספט, לא? זה אין בישול אחר בישול, לא?
אין בישול אחר בישול, אבל בכל זאת אסור להחזיר למקום שמבשלים באופן רגיל, כי זה נחזה כמבשל, זה נראה כמבשל. אפילו אם זה אין בישול אחר בישול, אבל לתת למקום שמבשלים בדרך כלל, זה נראה כמבשל. ועל זה צריכים את כל התנאים של חזרה, לאחוז את זה כל הזמן, להיות במחשבה להחזיר את זה, כל הפרטים האלה. I mean, למעשה, it's better to put it down on an upside down pot. If it's not Yad Tzeleres Boy, put it down on top of another pot. That's better. Yeah, on top of a pot is no problem. Why not? I mean, it's either dry, as long as it's either dry, or if it's liquid, it has to still be hot. You can't take cold liquid and heat it up.
It's not possible to get to Yad Tzeleres Boy if it's something on top of it.
Maybe not. I don't know. Talu.
Yeah, can you use one of those pancake things that are like that tall? Flip it over. You put it on top of the pot, or put it that high.
I think so.
Really? Wow.
Think you can repeat?
I think so.
Like a very short cleat. So flip it over, it's only like that high.
Like the baking pans, the challah baking trays. I think so. The Shmir Shabbos is the one who comes up with the idea that I know of, the first one that, printed it, that idea, flipping over a pot and using it. He allows it. So if it's allowed, it's allowed. What's the difference? It's a big pot, a small pot. So it would seem. Okay, moving right along. פישיקה כמון הסנוח מעסיקה אין בשביל התבשל אלא בשביל החימום הבייס שהוא דבר מותר. התבשל נרתח מאליו. ואף שהוא פסיק ראשון ולעמוס אין בזה 10 פעמים לנחם מטעם שנסבר למים. Okay, now we have a very significant kula. The Jew cannot take foods that are cold, liquids that are cold, and put it near a oven that he knows the guy is going to heat up. Because he's participating in the guy's, act of bishul. However, the guy is allowed to do it. He could tell the guy, listen here, take this pot, take that pot, take the other pot, put it around the oven that you're about to heat up, or even on top of, not inside. Right, around or on top of. Inside you can't do because
it's really cooked.
Because the Jew himself would not be allowed to do that. Right? You can't tell a guy to do something you're not allowed to do. Now that it's all around there.
But you're allowed to do it.
Allowed to do what?
Put the oven on.
The oven on, yeah. The oven on, yeah. And all the pots that he's putting around the oven or on top of the oven is also okay. Why? Because when he heats up the oven, what's his intention in heating up the oven?
Who, the guy?
The guy.
For food?
No.
To heat up the house.
Heat up the house. We're not talking about the cooking oven. They used to have a separate oven.
The Jew is attention to heat up the food.
The Jew didn't put the food there. The guy put the food there.
You also put the food?
Only the guy. Not also. Only the guy. Chavches.
You Jew cannot allowed to do that because it's a part of
the guy puts the pots on top of the oven, and then he heats up the oven.
But the Chaftan says that.
Yeah, Jew doesn't know to do that because it's part of the.
A Jew is not allowed to do this because he is participating in the act of bishul. No, the Jew is not because he's participating in the act of bishul. He's a partner in the act of bishul. Here, the goy puts it around, and then the goy heats the oven. Now, a goy cannot cook for you on Shabbos. What's going on here?
You cannot tell him to put that.
Can tell him exactly what's going on.
It's already cooked that way.
I know, but it's cooled off. It's cooled off.
It's already cooked.
It's cooled off.
When you put it on the side, it's not going to reach the
It's cooled off.
On
top?
But if it's going to be around, it's not going to reach the Yatzolet.
Let's say it's on top. On top.
Oh, on top?
Yeah. Nagid. On top. No, it's completely cooked, but it's lach and it's done in.
And bishul achar bishul, Rabbi.
Yes, bishul achar bishul balach.
Okay.
Bishul akum, it's fully cooked. What do you mean? And bishul, there's no bishul akum if something is cooked already. What do you think they do in the airplane foods? Why not? I'm saying if you have a good hechsher, kedasya, badatz, why not? If food is fully cooked and the guy reheats it, there is no bishul akum, even lach. So here's the thing: when the guy heats up the oven, the winter oven, the heating oven for the house, his intent is to heat the house. The fact that there are pots on top of it, even if he put the pots there, the cooking of those pots, or I should say the reheating of those pots, is considered a psik resha. That's a side consequence. That's not his main intent. It's a definite consequence, but it's not his main intent. And we've already said in the past that a psik resha al yedei goy is mutter. If the goy is doing an action that he's allowed to do, or I should say that you're allowed to tell him to do, because he can do whatever he wants, there's no question about that. But he's doing something you're allowed to tell him to do. For example, the example we had was, you're telling him to take the pot off of the coals. The action of taking a pot off of coals essentially is a permissible action. There's a secondary problem that the coals are going to roll around and go on and off or whatever. So that's called a psik reisha al yedei goy, which we said is permissible, because he doesn't care about those coals or falling or whatever. So that same argument can be put forth over here. His intent is to heat the house. The heating of the pots is coincidental, and therefore it's permissible.
Do we ever care about a guy's intent for Shabbos? Why would a guy's intent ever matter?
It's not so much about his intent. It's more about what he is your agent for. The concept of Amir L'Nachon Shabbos is related to Shlichus. He's like your Shaliach. He's your agent. So what is he your agent for? He's your agent for what his main objective is. If that's a forbidden thing, it's a problem. If it's a permissible thing, it's not a problem. The fact that there is a secondary action as a result of that is not going to be a problem. See what I'm saying? Yeah.
You're saying that you're not allowed to tell the Nochbe to do something with you, not allowed.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
On Sif Chav Zayin, we read that if he knows that the guy can heat up the house, you're not allowed to put the pots over there. You have to remove them before you're going to put it on. So basically, something that you're not allowed to do, to put them next to the oven. So how come that you're allowing it over here? Okay. Just to put it next to the oven is fine, but if you know that the guy is going to put the oven on, you shouldn't put it. Or send the second half of the So how can the author always said that I'm allowed to tell the guy to do it? It's something that Mitchila so allowed.
It's an interesting question. Interesting question. I don't know.
What's the question again?
The question is, if a Jew can't do it because his doing it is participating in the act of cooking, so why is he allowed to ask the goy to do it, even though it's a Rabbanan, but you can't ask a goy to do a Rabbanan for you either, l'achatchila?
Because we said if the fire is already slowed down, so the Jew allowed to do that. Because of that issue, he allowed to tell the goy to do it.
I mean, I could make up an answer, but it would be made up. And then it might be wrong. If I had to make it up, I would say that when the goy does it, so the whole action is not considered a bishul action, because when he lights the fire, it's a psik reisha. So therefore, it's not a bishul action. So even the preparation for that is not a bishul action. Whereas when the Jew does it, so because in his mind he cares about the bishul, so he becomes a participant in the bishul. Even though when the goy lights it, he doesn't care about the bishul. The goy just cares about the house, right? But because the Jew did an act that is bishul in his mind, that makes it bishul. But when the goy does everything and his intent is for the house, so then even the pots are not considered bishul. That's my.
So the question is, if a Jew allowed to eat that, to have a lunch?
If the goy does everything,
yes.
The first opinion says yes. However, the second opinion says, "V'yesh b'shoyser b'zeh, kivin she'anochem eskamen ma'asika gam b'shvil hatavshel, she'anich al gabe hataner oy etzloi, af she'kavnas b'shvil habayis ein zeh moel klum." The Taz has a very strong argument here. The Taz says, what do you mean a psik reisha? A psik reisha is when you couldn't care less about the secondary result. Over here, the goy specifically put the pots on top of the oven, and then he went ahead and heated the oven. How can you say he doesn't intend to heat those pots? Of course he intends to heat the pots. You just asked him to put them on. He put them on and he heated them up. What's the question? Now, it's the heating oven. It's the winter oven. His main objective is to heat the house, but you can't say he's not intending for the pots. This is where I came across what I mentioned before about Bishalakum, that it says concerning Bishalakum, the Taz quotes this, if the guy heats up an oven in order to strengthen kalim, he has, different kalim, whatever, pottery he wants to strengthen, but he knows that you have food in there, that food is Bishalakum, because he knows that you want that food. So even though it's a secondary intent, it's still an intent. So that's the Taz's argument over here. He puts the pots, and then he heats the oven. Of course he intends for the pots also.
But we don't care about that so much. He was going to be turning on the oven anyway. His intention started to turn on the oven, and that has never changed.
I understand, but now there's a secondary intention too.
And also, why do we care about his intention over here on Shabbos?
What his intention is what he is doing for you. He is your shliach to do the main thing that you're sending him to do.
Yes.
And if he's a shliach,
there's just a problem with us doing it.
No. When a goy does work for you on Shabbos, midrabanan, he's considered your shliach. Question is, what is he your shliach?
But we've established that if I were to do it, it's pater aval asur because it's a derabanan, yeah?
No. If you were to put it there, but if you were to heat up the oven, that would be a major problem. What do you mean?
We're not talking about turning on the oven.
Yes, we are. The goy puts the pots there, and then he himself heats up the oven. So I'm talking about when he's heating up the oven. After he put the pots there, his act of heating the oven is not only for the heat, it's also for the pots. Because he just put the pots there. How can you say he doesn't intend to heat up those pots?
No, he's just been maneuvered into a psik reisha position.
No, it's not a psik reisha. That's the Taz's argument. Psik reisha is when you have intent for one thing and the secondary thing is completely secondary. Over here, he says, he's going to have intent for two things.
Are we saying that it would be different if a second guy turned it on?
Maybe.
We'd have to. Otherwise, if I put the pot there, then he'd have the same problem. Wouldn't he?
What do you mean?
My pot of al-asr is going to put him in exactly the same position as him putting it there.
Maybe not. Not if he doesn't see you.
Okay, so in that case, it would. If you had two goyim do it, that would get around this problem.
Maybe. Question? No. Let me just actually see the Taz and see if he mentions the fact that the goy himself is the one who put it there. I'm pretty sure he does say that, but give me a moment.
My point was that if I do it and it's pater of al-asr, then it's no problem for the goy because it's not asr because it's.
I'm not talking about the part of putting it down there. I'm talking about the heating of the oven after it was put down there. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Is that a psik reisha or is that considered part of his intent? Shabbos lekeches me'osu tano ma'mido el atano shel beis hachorev hakol roin she'osu b'shvil hachimum u'mal ha'shechem koydem lo yeh meuchad. Valdas came Moshiva Sham. Yeah, he does mention that. He says, if by Bishul Akum we care about the secondary intent, how much more so Sha'akum miskaven bebir lechim matavshel, that the goy definitely intends to heat up the food. Valdas came Moshiva Sham. For this reason, he puts it there. Right? So therefore, how can you say it's not his intention? If another guy would do it, maybe it would be different. I don't know.
Well, it would have to be different because there's nothing wrong with the guy turning it on if I put it there. That's my issue, not the guy's issue. So if you get another guy to do it, then that's not forbidden. And if you then get the guy to turn the fire on, it's no different to asking.
That's your understanding that there's no problem if you put the pot there as far as the guy is concerned. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. Maybe, I don't know. It's the same question. Two goyim doing it is the same question as you doing it and then the goy.
Correct.
It doesn't say clearly that it's allowed. It says that it's not allowed because of whatever. It doesn't say that there is no issue with the goy. I'm saying it's not clear. Bal Nefesh and Yirei Shamayim. That's what I said. Yirei Shamayim, everybody should try to be Yirei Shamayim. Bal Nefesh is, not necessarily for everybody. Not that you could if you want, but it's not necessarily for everybody.
It's יותר מחמיר בעל נפש ופחות מחמיר בירושלים.
נכון. זה יותר, זה למי שרוצה עוד יותר.
מחמיר.
כן. והמנהג is ראשון במקום כל בעל נפש יח ולעצמי במקום שאין שם צורך כל כך. The minhag is like the first opinion, nevertheless, the Baal Nefesh will be strict if it is not so necessary. Daniel says, who told the guy to put the pots there? I thought it was the guy who put the pots on his own. No. The guy, you told him to. How would he do it on his own? Is there on top or next to the oven? Let me see. Did he say on top or next to?
I think he said next to in a place where it won't become hot.
No, we're talking about a place that's next to where it will become hot, but the same thing applies to on top of. Same thing. Any place that's not normal to cook, but it is able to get heated to the point of yasa let us buy. Okay, my friends, with 8 minutes to go, we're going to the home stretch. ואחר כך הסיק התנא ונרתחו המים מותר להונס הישראל מהם בשבס. אפילו לכתחילה מותר להם להשית מים בגדר קודם שיעסק התנא לדברי הכל. שהרי אין כוונה סכלה לכם המים, אלא לכם הבעיה שאינו ישתם מים בגדר, אלא כדי שתיבוקה הגדר. Okay, my friends, in those olden days, when they had these heating ovens, they had a pot attached to that oven. Again, the purpose of the oven was to heat the house. But they had a pot that they attached to that oven.
For coffee, tea?
For whatever they wanted. Now, if there was nothing in it, they had to fill it with water because otherwise it would crack. Too much heat in a pot, like if you put an empty pot in the oven, you turn it on, you're in trouble. So they would have to fill it with water. Now, the goy is coming on Shabbos morning. He's going to heat up that oven for the house. Permissible, absolutely permissible. You can tell him, pour the water into the pot, please, that's on top of the oven, because otherwise it's going to crack. What is his intent when he pours the water in there?
For the crack.
100% for the pot.
Yeah.
He doesn't occur to him that you're going to use that water afterwards to wash your dishes. You wouldn't drink that water because it's probably not such a clean area, but you might want to use it for your dishes. He doesn't care about that. His intent is 100% so the pot should not crack. That is a psik reisha. Even the Taz would agree in that case that it's allowed.
So in that
understand? One second. I want to clarify. In the previous case, the Taz forbids it because you're taking pots that are for cooking, reheating, and you're putting them there, or you're telling him to put them there, and then you're telling him to heat it up. So in the back of his mind, he cares about the cooking. But over here, it's not about the cooking. It's just that it should not crack.
Now, my question is this water, he put it for the not crack. I want to make a tea of that. Can I do that?
That's what we're saying right now.
Oh.
That's what we're saying right now. If, however, the non-Jew placed water in a pot that was permanently affixed within the oven, so the pot would not break when he kindled the oven, and the water boiled after he kindled the oven, a Jew is permitted to benefit from the water on Shabbos. Bakasha, tea. I mean, it was usually a dirty place, so you wouldn't drink it, but you would use it for washing the dishes. Moreover, even initially, all authorities agreed it's permitted to tell the non-Jew to put water in the pot before he kindles the oven. For the non-Jew does not intend to heat the water at all, only to heat the home. The water was merely placed in the pot so that the pot will not break. שכל דבר מדברים אלה שנסבר בסימן זה שעשה לעשות משום גזיר, שם אחד משום שנראה כמו שמתחילה, עשה להם לנוח לעשות זה, אפילו מנחם וצחל במים שסחמו עשו לו ליטר המים בעצמי, אפילו קודם שזה קטן. Nevertheless, if the Jew desires that the water will warm there so that he will be able to use it to wash dishes, it is forbidden for him to tell a non-Jew to place water in the pot. The rationale: if he desires to use the warm water to wash dishes, it would be forbidden for him to place the water there, not even directly before nightfall on Friday, because of a decree lest he stir the coals after the oven was kindled. As is explained in section 254, it is therefore forbidden to tell a non-Jew to place the water there. For in all the cases that were explained in this section, where an act is forbidden by a rabbinic decree, lest one stir the coals, or because it appears that one is cooking, it is also forbidden to instruct a non-Jew to perform it. I don't know if I'm even being understood. Even if the Jew has no desire at all that the water be warmed, he personally is forbidden to place water in the pot on Shabbos or directly before it, even before the oven is kindled.
Amen. I was waiting all night for that. Amen.
All right. Alter Rebbe has a chiddush here.
1 second. Are you allowed? You didn't say on the end of the save.
Let me say, I didn't explain what.
No. I want to ask. In the beginning of the save, you said that you're allowed to tell the guy to put water before you was putting it on.
Yep.
But let's say putting it on.
And then add water. We're going to read about it now.
You're allowed to tell.
We're going to read about it right now. Right now. Wait. We're up to that. But first, let me explain what I just said. The Alter Rebbe says, if you are planning to use that water for heating, for washing dishes, you can't tell him to put it in. If he put it in on his own, or even you told him to, but at that moment you weren't planning to use it, later you can use it. But if you wanted to use it, you can't tell him. Because after all, there is no cover on the coals. And just like you can't have water on a stove from before Shabbos, because you may stoke the coals, so having a goy do it is no different. The goy doing it on Shabbos is no different than you doing it before Shabbos. Before Shabbos, I didn't do anything wrong. It's before Shabbos, I can do whatever I want. Nevertheless, if you have water heating, even for washing dishes, on uncovered coals, you have a problem, because you may forget and stoke those coals. So here, the goy putting it there is no problem. The guy's doing it for whatever he's doing it. He's doing it for the pot, he's doing it for the house, whatever. But you care about the water, you want it to be hot, and it's being heated with uncovered coals, you have a problem. That you can't allow.
So it's the same thing with the food. You tell him to put the food around that, and then you pour in the house.
Yeah, but the food is fully cooked. The food is fully cooked.
No, but
there's no issue of stoking the coals. There's no issue of stoking the coals of the food. I understand. That's as far as he's concerned. But you might stoke the coals. If you care about the water, you might stoke the coals. So what? He's allowed to care about the pot. You don't have to stoke the coals. You don't have to stoke the coals to save the pot. And the contrary, the pot will be better if the coals are not stoked. Question?
So what do you
He takes it off on his own. You're allowed to use that water.
Yes.
If he did it and you didn't intend to use it, you can even use it. Because he was allowed to do it, and you're even allowed to tell him to do it. But you can't tell him to do it if your intention is to use it. Because then now that you care about it, you may stoke the coal. That's the issue.
My question is, why is the water not clean if this pot we fed for the crack, but the steel pot is good? We don't want the crack, so the water should be good.
I don't know if this was such a clean place. This was a place where they where it was a heating oven, and they would also use it for food, but I don't know if they put the food directly in that pot. They probably put like another pot in it or something. I don't know how it worked. ולפי המנהג שנהגו כסוהר ראשונה, אף אם כוונותיהם בנסיעה שמיים כדי לחמם מותר, כיוון שעיקר כוונותיהם מעסיקה הוא בשביל הבייס. According to the prevailing custom that follows the first opinion, even if the Jew's intent in having the water placed in the pot is to warm it, it is permitted since the non-Jew's primary intent in kindling the oven is to heat the home. Wow.
So I have
one second. No, I didn't realize this. Alter Rebbe is saying, according to the Magen Avram, who says that you're allowed to have the goy heat up the oven with the pots that he himself put in it. So obviously we're not concerned about stoking. And therefore it would be allowed according to the Magen Avram, even if your intention is to use this water.
Rabbi, I have another question, right?
No.
The guy come over to the house. He put the wood to warm the house. Then he want to make a cup of tea or coffee, and he put it hot next to it for him for the coffee. You can allow to.
Okay, we have to figure this out later. I want to finish this. I'm sorry. I want to finish. I'm sorry. אם ידוע בבאר שנסונן כדי לחם המים אסורים עד מוצאי שבס כדי שיעשו בדברי הכל כדי נוח לשלוש מלאכה גמור בשביל ישראל אבל מן הסתם נסונן כדי שלא תיבוק הקדר. As far as your question, the answer is if the guy first heated it and then added the water, if he added it only for the pot, you can use the water because he didn't do any malacha for you.
If the Jew told him to do it, or do a Jew allowed to tell him, listen, there's no water, it's going to crack. Put water.
I don't think you're allowed to tell him. No, I don't think you're allowed to tell him because the whole thing about him heating the house is to save you from being too cold. But it's not for a monetary thing. I don't think you're allowed to tell him.
So why is the pot?
I don't think you're allowed to tell him. But then it's a problem. Then you can benefit. If he did it on his own, presumably his intention was just to save the pot, so therefore you can benefit from it. But if you know that he did it because you want it, then you can't benefit. And whenever a guy cooks for a Jew, you can't eat it until after Shabbos.
Why the pot is there?
The pot was there all the time. It was attached to the oven, and they used to use it for heating things. And if it was empty, they had to fill it with water so it shouldn't crack.
Oh, okay, so he will fill it up anyway, the guy.
Yeah.
He knows.
Yeah. That was probably the thing he did all the time.
This sefer,
Yeah. I can't spare it even for one day. Okay, my friends, we're going to still tie up a few loose ends tomorrow. We have 10?
Yes.
Oh, all right, good evening, everybody, wherever you may be.
Thank you very much.
London, New York, and Aventura. All the best.
Good night, bye.
Bye-bye.